Hello friends. In the past 6 videos, we have looked at different tasks of image creation, starting with different inputs. Okay, so first we look at creating images using text, number one. And then we created variations of the image, number two. And then we used both text and an initial image to create new images, number three. And then we upscale the images, or we increase the resolution of the images, number four. And then we looked at multi-prompting. We also looked at the negative prompting in video number 5. And finally we looked at Inpainting, right? So those are the 6 different tasks we can use using the stable diffusion models. So in this video we are not going to learn any new task, but we will quickly see how we can achieve the same tasks using these endpoints. So in the previous videos, we used this Python SDK, right? Software development kit, and we use the stability AI client, etc. Right? But in this video, I will quickly show you how we can achieve the same things using endpoint. Okay. So this request library, it's a generic library, right? So this requests and endpoints is a very generic thing. So it's not just for the stability AI, different models, not necessarily machine learning or artificial intelligence, uh, uh, can be hosted as endpoints where the user can provide an input in the form of a payload and get the response back and can parse the response to see the output. Okay. All right. Uh, okay. I have already deleted my API key, so this API key don't work. Anyway, let me remove from here as well. Okay. So this time we just need the request library. We don't need a stability AI's Python client. Okay. So here we have the API host, which is simply this API dot stability dot AI. Okay. And then we have the API key from the environments. Now using the API, we can do a couple of things. So let's start with the first one. So let me run this code quickly. All right. So with this one, so using the requests library, we are calling a get method. Okay. Now we have the URL, which is this API host, and then uh, we are hitting this endpoint called user account. Okay, the user account. Now we are providing the API key using from here. Okay, using the bearer. So we get the response back, and if the status code is not equal to 200, that means we have communicated with the API endpoint and we have received some response. Okay, so the response is this. So this basically contains, we hit the account endpoint, right? So it will contain the email ID. Uh, uh, this may be the user ID, my user ID, some sort of organization, so on and so forth. Okay. Uh, but the balance will be more useful. So it shows I have this much credits. Okay. Now I don't remember how many images I can create using these many credits, but I think when we create the API, they'll give 100 credits for free. Okay, after exhausting those 100 credits, we will have to purchase. Okay, so it's a useful one, the balance one, and then this one, the engines list. It will show you all the models we can call using the request method. All right, so what all we have? So this is an ID. So we were using, which one? We can parse this response, but I think we were using this stability diffusion version 1 model, one of the version 1 models, right? So this is in painting version 2 type picture, x2 plus scalar model. So these are all the engine types which are available to access via the request or the endpoints. Whereas with Python client, we had access to only one of the models, which is some V1 version, right? Whereas here we can access multiple models. So we can access this V2 version. Yeah, this is the model we were using in um, the Python client. Okay. Uh, so yeah, so I want to show you these three tasks. First, you can get your account details. More importantly, you can get the balance, and also you can check all the endpoints available. Okay. Now I'll just show you one example of uh, generating the models using text prompt. So we have the engine ID. Now the URL will be the API host. So that is kind of prefix. So the API host remain the same. So it is this https api dot stability.ai. So the API host, and then uh, so we'll have the model version, and then we have the task. Okay, so text to image, that's the endpoint. Okay, so we are going to hit this URL using the request library. Now, whenever we make this post request, we need three things. One, where do we want to hit? Okay, and then the headers, which contains the input output formats in the form of this content type and what data it can accept, etc. But more importantly, it will have the API key, so that when we hit this endpoint, uh, that endpoint allow us to make a post request and return the response, right? So it is going to authenticate us using the API key. And finally, we have the payload, which is where we submit our request or the input, whether it is numerical data or text or maybe an image, etc., etc., right? So here payload is a dictionary. Now, as before, we have a text prompt, we have the scale and a bunch of other parameters like the number of diffusion steps, size, and how many samples we want, etc. Right? So using these three sets of information, the endpoint, the headers, which include the key, and then actual payload, which include the request, the input information, will call the post method. Okay. Then again, if the response is not equal to 200, that means everything went well. Okay. I mean, the response, we might not have received an image, but at least we are able to hit the API, and the API or the endpoint is able to respond. That's what not 200 means. Okay. If there is some issue, we'll get this 200 as the status code. And then uh, so we simply parse the response. Now we might have requested for multiple images, right? Whereas in this case we requested only for one, but you can just iterate over this response. So this response JSON, it will give us the data, and again the data will have artifacts. Okay. Similar to visa data, I mean, the Python client, it has these artifacts, which has the seed, which has the return type, etc., etc., right? So yeah, you loop over this response, and then we are saving the images to our local file. Okay, again the response will be in the form of this binary file. So here we opened a file, png file, in binary format, and we have written the content of the image, which is in this base 64 format. Okay, and then we are simply showing the image. Okay. All right. So for other tasks also, it will be pretty much the same. So here we have the task description. So the endpoint will be different for different tasks. The header won't change, and the payload, depending on what task we are doing. If we are creating image variations, so we need to supply initial image. If we are doing in painting, we need to supply two images. One is the reference image, and the second one is the mask. Okay. So the parameters will change, but again, the payload, this is the format, and we use these three sets of information to make a post request, and then we get the response. Okay. So that's how uh, we can interact with this stability AI endpoints. That's all for today. Thank you very much.